Hello and welcome to the first in a series of theoretical discussions that inform our practice that we're hosting here at Scottish Tenants News. I wanted to talk a little bit today about pluralism, organisational pluralism, where it comes from, why it matters. But first, I'd like to sketch out a little bit of the potted social history of Scotland in recent times. Since the late 1970s, 1979 in particular, there's been a move towards a type of economy which people call neoliberalism, and in particular the type of neoliberal economy, a finance, insurance and real estate economy. And what's that meant is there has been a decline in civil society more generally. Working families find that they don't have enough time. The stress of a low-wage economy, it's called flexicurity, but basically means people don't have security, has put real pressure on families. The rise in the cost of everything from housing to food and drink, particularly in recent times, but certainly housing over the past few decades has placed huge pressures on families. We find more and more that single-person households are coming forward. That changed a little bit with immigration, but it's the pattern still holds true. And what does that mean? A decline in civil society. You know, all these people very pressurised, struggling to find enough money to put on the table. Well, people don't go to church. You have empty churches, huge numbers of empty churches around the country. I'm not singling out Christianity as a particular faith group, but, you know, faith in general in society has declined. Trade union membership, again, has declined. Voluntary activities, they've declined. Tenants and residents associations declined almost to the point of non-existence, particularly in the poorest communities. So we have a Scotland where over 50% of housing is in housing schemes, and very little representation for those housing schemes. You know, when you watch the television, listen to the radio, or you know, look at social media, very often what you're seeing reflected at you is a world dominated by those who are doing rather better in the present social order. And, you know, that has had huge impacts on working people's ability to demand justice. One of the central tenets of liberal capitalism is the idea that politicians will be subject to lobby by the public through civil society. When that civil society ceases to function or doesn't function as well as it could, those politicians who answer to lobbying are only being lobbied by business interests, elite interests. And as a result, they govern in the favour of those interests. And that is contrary to many of the ideas of liberal capitalism. But that's where we are. So that's a kind of broad historical sketch. But coming back to the question of pluralism, why is it important? Well, in recent times, I think in a large part due to the decline in civil society, whether that be trade union membership, tenants associations, community groups of all sorts, religious institutions, people are ill-equipped to deal with working alongside others that they disagree with. And what they see reflected on the television and in social media and across, you know, broadcast media in general, is when you have an idea that matters to you, well, form a group of people who agree completely with you. And, that's the basis of many political parties. There are others which are broader churches, but, many political parties function on that basis. Everyone is in real agreement on this point. But that doesn't work if the purpose of coming together is to defend you and your colleagues from abuse by your boss. Now, you might disagree with your colleagues in all manner of things. You might not like them. You might even think that person is a reactionary sod. That person is, a real neurotic. I don't like this person. That doesn't matter. Not in a trade union context. What matters is your ability to exert power through withdrawing your labour, through sabotage, through direct action, through forcing power in the form of your boss to negotiate and come to some kind of agreement with you and your colleagues. So what matters in that context is pluralism. And that's absolutely true in the community as well. Even more so, in fact, because while individual jobs may attract certain sorts of people at certain stages in their life, communities involve everyone. In my community, there are people who don't believe in COVID-19 that we've all been living through. There are people who are very afraid of it. There are people who are Scottish Unionists. There are loyalists. There are strong supporters of the monarchy. There are Roman Catholics and Republicans. There are, Jews. There are atheists. There are different strands of Buddhism. There are communists. There are Tories. There are anarchists. There are Liberal Democrats. All these people, all these different viewpoints. How do those people come together to assert their shared interest? Well, it has to be with pluralism. And because we have had this collapse in civil society, people imagine that their problem is unique to them, or that only they matter. So you have a situation where people will attend a meeting or come to speak to a committee person and say, "Oh, please, my problem." And it's almost like they're entreating a king back in the Middle Ages to say, my situation is far worse than her situation and his situation. Please help me. And the job of anyone interested in building civil society is to cut through that, to engage in popular education. And how do we go about doing that? Well, I wanted to turn today to Saul Alinsky, a strong influence of mine, a community organiser in the earlier part of the 20th century in the USA. Now, obviously, the USA more of a sort of liberal capitalist country than Scotland. Through the People's Organisation, these groups discover that what they consider primarily their individual problem is also the problem of others, and that furthermore, the only hope for solving an issue of such titanic proportions is by pooling all their efforts and strengths. That appreciation and conclusion is an educational process. More important is the fact that leaders of groups that have seemingly conflicting interests get to know each other as human beings by working together on joint programs of mutual concern. They get to know each other as Johnny and Fred. They learn that they both admire the same ball team. They both cuss when they have a flat tire. They both are filled with the cute sayings of their 3 and 4-year-olds. And essentially, they both want just about the same things out of life. Where they differ is in the means to be used in achieving the end. I think that's a very important point, because when people disagree with each other, particularly now in this age where social media has actually pulled us apart, and where civil society, where common ground between others has ceased to exist, and what's arisen in that kind of social media bubble is horror things such as cancel culture, where someone says something out of turn or reactionary, and so therefore they are to be thrown out of the tent, even if what they said 5 years ago and they no longer agree with it. People are not allowed to change. Anything they said or thought or felt in the past is held in aspic and held against them forever. That is antithetical as an idea to building power through pluralism on the ground. Those who have devoted themselves to the building of people's organisation have become more and more convinced that one of the most significant educational approaches is not through argument, through lectures, through logic, or any other conventional common practice, but through rationalisation. Those organisers feel, on the basis of their experiences, not only is the people's organisations, but in their own general life, that most people, in a great many instances, act first and think afterwards on the reasons why they acted. It seems as though a good part of our knowledge and what we may refer to as our own philosophy and attitudes are not things that we carefully and laboriously think through, but are the rationalizations or self-justifications for acts we have already committed. Now, I've just been talking about pluralism, but coming at it from my own perspective, people are creatures of habit. It was one of the most profound observations that the 19th century philosopher Karl Marx came at. Probably his most profound. People are creatures of habit. And what happens if you have a community organised for powerlessness, where people are siloed into different groups? Oh, we don't talk to him. We don't talk to them. They're weirdos. Only these people are the right people for the committee. That is a community that is organised for powerlessness, because it's not pluralist in character. The role of an organiser and the role of an institution like the STO, we hope, the steering committee of the STO hopes, is to smash organisation for powerlessness and to put in place organisation for power. That is a pluralist organisation. Democratic, yes, but fundamentally based in the self-interest of people who come together based on their proximity, the self-interest of proximity. They have many of the same enemies. They don't necessarily have any of the same perspectives, but by coming together, they become stronger. And, it's very similar to the idea of Sun Tzu's. The idea that when you take an enemy, the most important thing is not to butcher them and assure your suzerainty, but to take the enemy soldiers and make them your soldiers. Now, obviously, that's a cod military analogy, but there's an element of truth there. I might not agree with Jane. I might think, Jane, I can't abide her view. But I want to be working with Jane because we have the same landlord, or we have the same rent collector, the same debt collector, the same factor, the same council, the same problem. That is pluralism. That's why we have to come together.
In the world as it is, people move primarily because of self-interest. In the world as it is, the real question has never been the sort of silly one about the end justifying the means. It's always been, Does this particular end justify this particular means? If you understand that, it explains many things around. In the world as it is, you have to start from where you are and not from where you would wish you would be. And this doesn't mean that the fact that you accept the world as it is, that in the slightest sense, that it negates or dilutes your desire to strive towards the world that you would like it to be. But if you're going to have any kind of a chance of achieving the kind of world you would like it to be, then you have to begin with the world as it is.
And this is where the problem arises when you have that cancel culture, that superciliousness, only we are correct, only we know best. Someone informed by that will give tears, duper's delight. Alinsky nails it. A common cause of failure in organisational campaigns is to be found in a lack of real respect for the dignity of the people. Some organisers may feel inwardly superior to the people with whom they are working. An organiser who has this superior attitude cannot, in spite of all his cleverness, all his protestations of belief in the equality of all people, including himself, conceal his true attitude. It repeatedly comes out in a gesture, an expression, or the indirection of his voice. People cannot be constantly fooled. Even when that organiser uses a sympathetic approach, it is a calculated form of sympathy which is apparent to the people. An organiser who really likes people will instinctively respect them. He will not treat adults as children. He will have the utmost consideration for the pride and feelings of those whom he is trying to organise. And that is, in a nutshell, it's why this idea that we can abandon pluralism is for the birds.
See, one of the I don't want to get into a long philosophical discussion, but you're giving a 19th century notion of progress, and progress is a mighty hard, long road to hoe. And, in terms of your example about the mountain, that there's this summit that man's got to get to,
No.
that, he's got to go through all these struggles to get there. There's a group of people now who talk about abolishing the mountain.
Yeah, you see,
the world, social change.
No,
social change is not just, advancing and developing in certain points up a mountain that you've defined as the mountain, and there's a summit.
This is called 19th century.
Well, okay, yeah, call it 19th century notion of progress. You know what it is philosophically. The important thing is that social change means changing the world.
Mm-hmm.
That is. That's what social change is. That it's not a unilinear line that always reaches for the summit of the mountain.
Well, now, wait a minute. That line, if I give you the impression, is leading up to that mountain. It's so goddamn detoury all around the place.
I know, but you're still going. You still want to be up on the summit of that mountain.
Well, I've
progress.
got to believe he's going to get up there, because if I don't, what the hell am I crapping around
I believe he's
for?
going to destroy the mountain, and that whole struggle won't even be meaningful. Man, I've been doing stuff for 7 years.
All right,
now, I haven't got a TWO to my credit.
All right,
but I seek a transformation of society. I don't seek to keep sending people up the mountain. And blowing the mountain is not copping out.
It's not copping out?
No.
Where the hell are you blowing it?
You change it. You just don't ask
How
people.
Are you gonna change
you don't
it?
ask people. You don't say, this is man, therefore you're going to do it, because this is man. This is is. I decided this is is.
You talk about blowing up the mountain. It's just a pile of words.
Well, going up it is just the same pile of words.
The hell it is.
It isn't, huh?
No, it isn't. You're organizing the poor for what? To participate in these decadent, decayed, degenerate, bourgeois values. Well, when I talk to the poor, when they ask me to work with them, you know what they want? They want a bigger, fatter piece of these decadent, degenerate, bourgeois values. All right, this may be wrong, but this is
Of course they want that. That's what the media's taught them to want. That's what the whole socialization process is about. Of course.
All right, you want to go organize them on other values that you have decided are better values for them?
I think there's someone here who works for a group of people who are operating on different values.
You mean the hippies?
The hippies are the first ones who try and live in a new value system. They're the first ones who actively deal with the problem of utopia. They don't have to write about it. They don't have to think about it. They try and live it. They try and live their lives as they want them to be in a new society.
Look, you've had hippies from the time the world began. At one point, the desert was so goddamn crowded with hippies during the early days of Christianity that people started climbing, went back to the cities and started climbing up to mountain cabins to get away and to live their kind of life. You think this kind of withdrawal and this kind of, all right, I will go live my life, I'll live it in Haight-Ashbury, or I'll become a Trappist monk and I'll live it over here?
Yeah, okay.
And you think that is being people, let me put this
But one of the major theories of social change is that you build up counter institutions to what is, and that a new society emerges.
All right,
how the hell did Christianity develop? What's the development of capitalism? It's the same thing.
You don't have a tougher, harder, more realistic operator than Paul in organizing Christianity. If Paul hadn't come around to organize a Christian church, Christ would have been another guy hanging on a cross.
There's always the organizers. I'm not saying there isn't the organizers.
He was the guy who
But I'm saying there's a different set of values that grow up alongside another.
When you start organizing, and you start organizing like a guy like Paul, and you can see his reports coming in from his organizers. They call them missionaries. I got a bunch signed up here. They're all ready to buy it, but they don't want to be circumcised. They say it hurts. Skip the circumcision. I got another group over here. They're all ready to come in, but they don't want to give up lobster and seafood and so forth, which is against the Mosaic law. The hell with that. Drop that out. Sign them on. You can see this guy organizing and dealing all over the place. As long as you are not organized, you will never have power, which is, I repeat, the ability to act. Don't look at power in an invidious context with all of the emotional sordidness of conspiracy and negativism and corruption and so forth that most people associate with it. It's simply the ability to act. It's my heart pumping, the power of my heart to keep me alive. It's actually the life force itself. As long as you don't organize to have that power, you can have 1% of the people of this world, let's say the bastards, organized, and all the rest of the world hippie, and that 1% is going to run the whole damn world, you know?
Isn't that what's happening now, on the basis of power organizations?
One of the reasons, yeah, but you know why it's happening? Because the kind of people you're talking about have dropped out. This is the cowardly way out. As far as I'm concerned, if there is such a thing as a judgment day, which I seriously doubt, because if there is, Jesus, your first question to St. Peter is not, don't ask me how I've been behaving, you know, what happened to your marbles, really, in terms of the world, what's happening down there. But if there is one, and a guy who has his marbles, and a Trappist comes up there, or a hippie, and he says, what the hell have you been doing all your life? He says, well, I've been living up to my values. Well, what have you been doing as far as other people are concerned? All the suffering here and this and so forth. Well, I've been setting an example, or, you know, I don't want to fight the mountain. I don't want to climb it. I want to blow it or something. Oh, for Christ's sake, what kind of a character have you got here? There are ways of running away. There are ways of running away, and running away means you're running away from the real world.